Hello, everybody. It's me, V, White Zulu, and welcome to another reading from my autobiography of the same name. I left you with St. Anne's Prep, my first taste of real boarding school, proper school. And this is chapter 31, St. Anne's Prep, part 2. The term dragged on. I made no progress with my hospital corners, and my foot locker always looked as if a baboon had been rummaging through it. Often there was evidence to make me suspect that my dormitory fellows had sabotaged it, but I had no proof as I never actually caught them at it. I loathed and dreaded meal times, and somehow got away with pushing my food around without actually eating any of it. I was quick enough to shove it under the stack as it came my way, and acted with lightning speed so that the stack was gone with my food, squashed in there somewhere before Grindelbug or Turney had a chance to look in my way. I was sent up to the school doctor for a routine medical examination during the first week at the prep. He was called Dr. Mackenzie, or Strip Mac, by all the girls, since he was rumoured to tell all the girls to strip, even if they went in with a sore toe, just so he could look at their bare bosoms. I was petrified, horrified by the thought of being alone and naked in front of a strange man. Turney accompanied me up to the San, a building on the college grounds, and left me there with the school sister, a gimlet-eyed middle-aged woman with a starched nursing sister's cap on. She looked at me suspiciously, weighed me, and measured my height, and then sent me through to the examining room, where Dr. Stripmack was waiting. He was an old man with glasses and a grumpy expression. "You're very thin," he said accusingly. There was no answer to that, so I kept silent while he examined me in my dress. Obviously, I wasn't worth being told to strip. As I had no bosom, I was as flat as a board. "You have curvature of the spine," the doctor said eventually. "I'm ordering the matron to confiscate your pillow." And I was dismissed. I was so relieved that I wasn't going to be made to take my clothes off, eat extra food, or be given a vile-tasting tonic from the huge bottle of black liquid I'd seen in the San. This was long before the days of vitamin supplements. I was to have a tablespoon of cod liver oil and malt extract every morning after breakfast instead. I loved the cod liver oil and malt, as it reminded me of the molasses we poured over the silage at home. It smelt delicious, and we always stuck our fingers in the black gooey substance while it was being trickled over the freshly cut green hay in the autumns at home. I was puzzled about having my pillow taken away, though, as I always slept on my side, and didn't make any sense to me that being without a pillow would make any difference to my spine. I stooped because I'd grown so quickly and towered above all the other children of my age. It was just poor posture, not curvature of the spine. Time seemed to stand still. I missed home. I missed my Zulu friends most of all, as I couldn't identify with these strange girls with their coded, incomprehensible language and the way they always stopped talking when I joined the group and stared at me and then elbowed each other. They giggled and turned their backs on me and left me standing there. The younger girls tolerated me playing with a tennis ball against the wall of the assembly hall. Donkey was a good game which involved a tennis ball and as many players as you liked. We threw the ball up against the wall and had to jump, straddled over to where it landed for the girl standing in line behind to catch it and throw again. We hitched our dresses up into our bloomers and jumped over that ball until we lost it in the gutter on the tin roof, or the bell rang for classes or meals, or anything that involved them all racing off and me following them, hoping I was going to the right place. Mum came to visit me one Sunday afternoon after her weekly social tennis game at the Pietermaritzburg Country Club was rained off. She stayed for 10 minutes, asked me how it was going, didn't wait for an answer, but thrust a small packet of mint imperials, her favourite peppermints, at me. She hadn't thought to bring me any tuck, as all the other parents regularly did, most of them bringing boots full of picnics with roast chickens and cakes and bags of sweets and chocolate. I stood there in the school drive with a lump in my throat, clutching my packet of mints, as I watched our great big Pontiac gig lurching off down the road in a cloud of dust. I went into the music dungeons and sat there in the dark on my own and ate the whole packet, crunching up sweet after sweet until the packet was empty. Then I started to feel really nauseous and thought I was going to be sick. I spent the whole of the rest of that Saturday, lying on the lawn behind the big old fir tree in the playground near the swings, wondering if I was going to throw up. My feet were giving me terrible trouble too. I was not used to wearing shoes, and they immediately began to rub blisters on my heels that very first day I put them on. The blisters became raw patches, and then I had to ask for sticking plasters from Grindelbug and permission to wear the hated brown Clark sandals, which had been sent along in my trunk. These caused a whole new set of problems as I sweated into them in the summer heat. It was now December. They began to stink. I'd never had smelly feet before, and at first I wondered where this stench was coming from. When I identified the sandals as the cause, I was then at a loss as to what to do about it. The only thing I could do was swap them for my shoes and socks and risk the blisters again, as my hard, leathery outdoor feet continued to fester. Just the farm and the dogs. If I went to the farthest boundary of the prep, I could just see the mountain range with the Intlizaan on it. This was a mountain exactly the same shape as the Intlizela on our farm. They were twins. I sat on the dusty ground and stared at the peak, wishing myself there so that I could walk into the lovely warm kitchen, which always smelt deliciously of roasting meat and potatoes or freshly baked bread, to be greeted with utter joy by the servants. I wished I could run away like my predecessor had, but I knew that Dad would find a worse punishment for me. Things began to look up as the term passed and the end began to become a reality rather than a distant, shimmering mirage. In the space of 6 weeks, I grew a bosom. This created yet another problem for me. You need a bra, snared the girls in my dorm, mainly the same two who had originally and continued to torment me in the bathroom. It was true. I did suddenly need a bra. I had sprouted quite a substantial bust overnight. It was most uncomfortable and made me hunch my shoulders even more to try and hide it. This drew shouts of "Stand up straight" from the matrons and teachers alike as I stood in line for assembly and the dining hall, towering over the other children. Girls, rather. I wasn't going to see Mum until end of term, so there was nothing I could do. We had to write letters home on Sunday afternoons, but the letters were read and censored by the two matrons, so I didn't mention my new bosom to my parents, especially if Dad was going to read the letter as well. I wanted Mum to take me out and buy me a bra, since she came past the school every single Thursday to play tennis at the Pietermaritzburg Country Club, while Dad played his 18 holes of golf. But I was too frightened even to mention the word in a letter. There was a possibility that she might stick her head in if I was lucky and her tennis was rained out. But otherwise, I was going to have to tough it out until the end of term. We had gymnastics twice a week and swimming at the college pool every other day. And I had to manhandle these new bosoms into my gym shirt and bathing costume, neither of which had any room now. The rest of me was skin and bone, since I wasn't eating. So my black gym bloomers looked enormous on me, but my bust had to be squashed into the top, a little white cotton shirt, not even a stretchy t-shirt. They hadn't been invented yet. Running around the tennis courts and the pool changing rooms were full of pitfalls for me, and I did my best to hide myself in a corner and undress as furtively as possible. I was still suffering from the odd growing pain and was also very tender in my new budding busts, so I didn't feel that well, especially having to tear about after a tennis ball. I had to stop playing donkey with the more amenable younger girls as I was so uncomfortable. Term ended with a blur of carol services and some sort of school play, but neither featured as high on my own private list of priorities as having to keep my head down and manage all my personal problems. Finally, the day came when I could climb thankfully into the enormous car, already crammed with my two older sisters. I could have kissed them with joy, as they were the old familiar enemy, the ones I could cope with. But we greeted each other with grunts and "Move over, idiot, get off my dress," and other such pleasantries. This car started and we were off through the gates and on our way home. I began to regale Mum and my sisters about the horrible time I'd spent at the prep when Nicolette turned to me and said, "Shut up, stupid. You're going to see all those girls next term, as they're all going to the college with you." I had a glorious 6 weeks of summer holiday, riding by myself and swimming and playing tennis with my sisters to look forward to. Now, fully aware of how they'd felt, having been thrust into the prep in the same way I'd been, although they'd got in with the new girls at the beginning of term and not thrown in at the end of the year on my own. I could empathize with them. Sadly, their bitterness at having been sent away so young had become so ingrained that we couldn't form any kind of relationship. I could no longer play fairies with Dine. She'd become a teenager and was only interested in boys, clothes, and pop music. They also went off to stay with friends in order to attend dances and tennis parties, leaving me behind again with Delia, who was still at the government school. I went off to look for my Zulu playmates, only to discover that they'd all gone back to Mbendla, sent away by their parents to get a bit of schooling of their own if they were lucky, or to herd goats or cattle if they were boys, or fetch water and firewood and do chores around the huts if they were girls. There was nobody left of my own age, although there were still some babies and toddlers around, with their mothers at the huts at the back of the house. I know it was Dad's policy to insist that his labourers get rid of their teenage children unless there were jobs open for them on the farm. Having young idle months around the place only causes trouble, to quote him. Previous winter, 2 boys, neither of them who were my special friends, I was glad to say, had set fire to a haystack, drawing Dad from his after-lunch doze in his comfortable armchair next to the heater in the Glaston veranda. When somebody came to raise the alarm one quiet Sunday afternoon, mustering a trailer full of labour from the Zulus available, Dad had driven the old jeep crossly to the far field on the boundary next to where our silage pit was, taking me and the dogs with him at the back of the jeep. Actually, I'd just clambered in when the dogs scrambled up, hoping I wouldn't be noticed in the melee. Once we got there, bumping over the veldt, I saw the bright orange blaze as the entire big stack burnt fiercely. Our Induna Ngiti stood there with the 2 Mfans next to him, the culprits. "Where did you get the matches from?" Dad asked them, and there was no reply, as they both hung their heads in shame. He drew back his walking stick and gave each of the boys, both my age, 11, 3 hard whacks across the backside. Dust flew off their ragged khaki shorts as the stick made contact. I was staggered, as I'd never seen Dad hit anyone before. It was always Mum who meted out our punishments, smacking us on the bum with the back of her Mason and Pearson hairbrush imported from London. But Dad never hit us. I'd never seen either of them ever lay a hand on any of the Zulus before that day. Once the punishment had come to a swift end, Dad dismissed the 2 perpetrators and got Ngiti to keep a team of firefighters next to the smouldering stack to see that the wind didn't whisk away sparks and set fire to the rest of the farm. There were still the adult Zulus, though, and I spent most of my time with all of them, trying to explain how awful school was. To the Zulus, an education was the only way out of poverty and squalor, so I had very little sympathy. They'd been so impressed to see me in my smart uniform, going off with a huge trunk full of clothes. It was a dream come true to them. Back to my own company, I spent most of my time on horseback roaming the farm and nipping down to the nuns to see my friends there. My priest had gone back to Durban, so there was nobody free to ride with me any longer. Sister Anne had pledged her vows over Christmas and become a proper nun, and it was odd to see her in her snowy white habit, looking just like the older nuns. She wasn't available to slip away to have secret rides on my horse any longer, although I was given a warm greeting by all the nuns. Loneliness became a bit more obvious to me now, and I realized that I should have made friends at school like my sisters had. Worried me that I hadn't found even one single girl who'd even remotely taken an interest in me. They'd all turned their backs on me, the odd new girl. That's all for today's reading. Plenty more to come. I want to thank John Moslane really from the bottom of my heart for putting aside his Fridays to do these readings for me, with me, and being in charge of all the operations. And if you'd like to see more photographs and more information about my other works, please visit my website at www.whitezulubook.com. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.